Welcome to Aliyah Money Talks, brought to you by Blue and White Finance. We are thrilled today to be joined by Ramon Hirsch, who's the head of JGive Platinum, to hopefully learn a little bit more about managing our donations, saving a bit on tax, and making our donations go that little bit further. So thanks very much for joining us, Ramon.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So perhaps, do you want to tell us a little bit more about JGive so that we can understand where you work, what the organization does?
Totally. Great. I'll give you a little bit of background and then we can dive in. JGive is a nonprofit organization. We've been around since 2014. It is nonprofit by definition, but if you walk in, you'll definitely feel a more startup fintech vibe because we're really a digital philanthropic platform for all the players in the philanthropic space. Our activities are really in three main areas. We work obviously with Israeli amutot, charities. All Article 46 status Israeli charities can use our platform for their back office needs, for crowdfunding, for payment solutions, as a source of information, webinars, data, all kinds of things. We give them all the support they need. We work obviously with donors as well, which we'll get back to, but that's the whole world of, people who are coming to give either a spontaneous donation or use the donor advised funds, which we'll get to. And the third area of our activity is really the corporations. We work with a lot of large corporations in Israel, such as Mobileye, Monday, NVIDIA, helping them with their corporate responsibility, but also helping their employees give in a smarter, better way, in that once they link to our system, they're actually able to receive their tax benefits directly to their pay stub, whether it's monthly or quarterly, whatever the organization decides. And that really helps us accomplish our goals of bringing more people to the giving table. JGive, just I'll give you really briefly in numbers for a second. We've dealt with 3 million donations, over 1 billion shekels, thousands of Israeli charities. So it's a really exciting and innovative organization that I'm glad to be part of.
Incredible. So maybe let's go to the basics. You're talking about employees in Monday, Mobileye, giving donations. When we give a donation in Israel, what are the tax benefits that we get?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty basic, even though it's not so well known and it's becoming more and more common. So I'm glad to start there. But basically, it works like this: assuming that you've given above the minimum, which is 207, shekels, and it was to an Article 46 status charity, which is the regulations of what is considered a charity in Israel. You're entitled to up to 35% tax receipt on that. There is a ceiling of about 10 million shekels. And if you want to get the tax benefits of that year, you do what's called a te'umas. If it's in the next year, it's ehser mas. And the situation actually is so much better today than it ever was because, in the past, when people would save their little tax receipts and have all the hard copies that they'd put in a filing cabinet or one of those, accordion folders or in their little nylonites, and they'd gather it all together and come at the end of the tax year with all their hard copies, they'd have a hard time getting it all in order and managing it all. But one of the things that we do at JGive is really help them in a couple of ways. First of all, they can get a centralized receipt. So for all of their donations, they come with one thing at the end of the tax year. And more importantly, we have a new API actually with the Israeli Tax Authority, in which the donations, if the donor so chooses, goes directly to the personal area in the tax authority, kind of saves in that extra step. And now they're able to just get it in a much easier, more direct way. And really, in the end, it just goes back to that same point that in the end, we're trying to improve the culture of giving in and to Israel. And there's so much money that's just sitting in the tax authority that people aren't recognizing and realizing their rights for the Hechser Mas, for the tax returns. So we're happy to be, changing that.
I think that's what I like most about what JGive's doing, and the fact that you're working with the tax authorities. We'll also talk about the donor advised fund and how you're working with some of the authorities there to be able to make life easier. And we see that in our clients, many of whom don't know what they can do with their donations. And it's a complex process to have to do te'umas and ehser mas. So anything that can be done to make that simpler is
no.
Really
and like
important.
you said, the cooperation with the Reshut HaMisim, the tax authority, is so important because in the end, everything's above board. We're doing it in a really organized and masudar way. And the best way to move forward.
Cool. So to make sure we understand the numbers, I give 1,000 shekels to a charity or to multiple charities through the year. I can get back 350 shekel as a tax credit, assuming that I've paid taxes for the year. I can't get it as a refund, but assuming that I've paid taxes for the year, then I can get it as a credit against my taxes or as a refund at the end of the year against taxes that I've actually paid.
Correct.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. So, tell us a bit more about your role in JGIV. What's the area of JGIV that kind of you're focused on?
So the whole donor world in general, but really the donor advised fund, as you mentioned earlier, is specifically the area that takes most of my focus. For those of you who are not familiar with the donor advised fund, it pretty much is an innovative charitable vehicle that we brought about 3.5, 4 years ago, in with the tax authority from the U.S. And basically, it says the following: you can take assets, cash, non-cash, whatever it is, deposit it into this account or virtual wallet, so to speak, receive a tax receipt at the time of deposit on the full amount. So, kind of the tax event is over at that point. And from there, you can grant out strategically over time to any Israeli charity that you want to. There's, so much growth that's been happening in this field, also in the world, but in Israel specifically, as people understand and kind of had this aha moment that it's the most strategic way to manage and give. Because you could think over time about what you want to be doing with your funds and not have to deal with the tax implications, you know, along the whole process. The other, really cool aspect of the donor advised fund is that you can also invest the funds. So let's say you decide at the end of the tax year you want to donate X amount of funds for charitable purposes. You get your tax receipt in that year. But then you can decide if you want to park it or, put it in one of the investment checks to accrue over time. That money will go back into your accounts. And you can decide over time what you want to do with it. Really build a kind of, giving strategy. I would say one more thing in the end, people use the DAF for all different purposes, and the JGIV DAF specifically is very agile because it's a digital platform. But if you, kind of look at the different groups of people who use the DAF in a strategic way, obviously there are those who have, let's say, large exits. And so for whatever, calculations they have, they want to get the tax benefits in that specific year to offset. Another group of donors who we find are using the DAF a lot these days are those who have funds or are actually physically abroad, like in the US. They can receive their American tax receipt because we have our 501(c)(3) as well. But their charitable good is actually being done here in Israel. And that's another kind of group. And the third one is really people who just are looking to manage their philanthropy in a smarter, more strategic way, like they live other parts of their life as well, to have everything managed and clear. um, Someone actually just reached out to us the other day. He just won the lottery and he also
Mhm.
wants to have a Daphne. I just feel like there's a lot of different uses. It really, meets people wherever they need and helps change the culture of giving for the good.
Okay, great. So to hone in on that benefit, essentially you can get a tax credit today for donations that you're going to distribute in the future. So if I've got an excess and I'm going to owe a whole bunch of tax this year, I could put 100,000 shekel into a donor advised fund and get 35,000 shekel this year off my taxes.
Right. Right.
And when we think about the person who doesn't have that kind of money and is maybe giving between 5 and 20,000 shekel, that's what I often see among clients
Mhm.
that we work with at Blue and White Finance, maybe 5 to 20,000 shekel per year. Um, what would be the reason that they would think about using a donor advised fund?
Yeah, it's a good question, really, because the truth is, as a charitable vehicle, there are a lot of benefits that come not just for people who are high net worth individuals or on larger scales. But I think I would start by saying, in the end, first of all, there's a benefit for managing everything in one place and being strategic about the way you're giving. So just like someone who's putting in 1 million shekels into their donor advice fund, someone who's doing it on a much smaller level can really use it to plan their long term charitable goals and kind of think over time what they want to be doing with their funds. Apropos of that, it really also helps a lot of individuals, but also families, which I'll talk about in a second, kind of build some kind of like budget for the year. So just as they put into, their thoughts, all different things that they want to be doing throughout the year, putting the money aside in one place, even again, it's 20,000 shekels, 30,000 shekels, whatever it is. It really helps people understand the year long, how they want to look at it and what they want to do with it. I mentioned family giving just because it's something that I feel like is particularly close to my heart because I've seen, in this, let's say people who want to make a DAF that's, smaller amounts, they kind of use it in a few different ways. There are those who are bringing in family members, let's say their kids, and they're making collective decisions every month of how they want to allocate their funds. or, they're using it really for like, teaching their kids that this is what we do. We put aside money every month, by the way. In parentheses, I'll just add that there's an option to do, what's called like a horat keva, like a standing order into the account and from the account. So for people who are managing, their monthly tithes or their maaser, it's also a really good tool to do that in a smarter, more, proactive way. Um, People use it for all different kinds of things. Like also, they'll open a donor advised fund for life cycle events like their son's bar mitzvah or this one's wedding or whatever it is. So there's really different ways that you can use it. And the truth is, it really connects with like a larger trends that we see worldwide. There's DAFs in the US and in other places that are really dedicated and geared towards smaller amounts because it's really a way to create and change the culture of giving, and be proactive in your giving. So we found it to be really a helpful tool across the board. I just add one more thing that when we actually started the donor advised funds, like I mentioned together with the tax authority, it was really only, as you mentioned, for like the higher level donors. But we found out very quickly that there were a lot of people who were interested in using it as a tool in and of itself. So we kind of opened it up to another track that's with, no minimum and anyone can use it as they want because there was this need from the grounds up of people really wanting to use it. So we found it to be a tremendous, tremendous impetus for change.
Yeah. And that sounds like it can be very useful for financial planning when a family wants to allocate money on a monthly basis and make sure that it disappears from their account before they spend it because they have a target around charitable giving. They can automate that into the DAF.
Yeah. Also, it's easier because it's already left their pocket. So it's not like, the money's sitting there and now they just have the fun of granting it out to whatever charities they want to give it to, but they don't feel that actual loss at the time. So,
Yeah. So I know that one of the questions and concerns that clients have when we talk about DAF is what kind of costs, what kind of fees are involved. Is there any fees that come out when we put money into the DAF? Are there any fees that come out over time? And are there any fees that come out when we distribute the money?
great. Great. So in general, the answer is, it's a very low fee and I'm going to explain how it works. There are, first of all, no platform fees when you're working with the donor advised fund. So what does that mean? If you want to give 10,000 shekels to your favorite charity, the 10,000 shekels that you grant out are going to go straight to the charity. So already it's a benefit because everyone's winning, especially in larger gifts. Those percentages are significant and this creates the best flow for direct giving. So that's, for sure. For deposits and for other, usages of the DAF, there's also no fees. The only thing that there is an annual fee at the end of the tax year. It comes out of the open balance that's in the account, and it works as follows. It's the based on the Fidelity Donor Advised Fund in the U.S. It's meant to be the best for the donors and for the charities, but it's basically a tiered structure that works on the amount of money that's sitting in the DAF that you've deposited. Up until a 500,000 shekels, it's 0.6%. And as you have more money, it goes down to 0.45 and zero point 0.3. But the idea being that we try to maximize the amount of funds that are going to the charitable organizations themselves. And, really we're able to do this because we have support from large philanthropists who actually really believe in the donor advised fund as a mechanism for change and support the activity. So we're able to keep the costs low.
Okay, very cool. So if we take an example, again, the kind of client that, might be listening to this, someone that wants to put 10,000 shekel in a DAF and they leave it there and the balance is 10,000 through the year.
Mhm.
Are they going to be paying 0.6%? Is there some kind of minimum?
So if we want to get really technical for a second, I mentioned earlier there are two different tracks, right? One is the JGIV Platinum track, which is for 50,000 shekels and above, and that's the structure that I just described. And then
Okay.
there's what we call JGIV Gold, which is for, under 50,000 shekels for any amount. If it's the gold track, basically what it means is that the structure is a little different. They're actually not paying on deposits. The only fee there is a 1.5% grant fee. So every grant that you make, 1.5 comes off from the charity. So it's two different structures based on, where you are on that gamut. But that's the basic idea. Again, with
Okay.
the intent of keeping it low and trying to facilitate as much direct giving as we can.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the really exciting things that I came across a number of months ago was that JGIV announced that there was a ruling from the tax authority regarding giving stock to a charity. Now, what can you tell us more about that, and what's unique and special about giving stock as opposed to donating cash to a charity?
Yeah, it's my favorite question because obviously we've worked on it a lot recently. And the very basic answer is it's definitely the most strategic way to give today. But I want to give a little background so everyone, understands exactly what we're talking about. I think I'll start with a story. We had a donor who came to us a couple years ago with a very surprising discovery. He had an investment portfolio that he had inherited from his grandfather, and somehow it included some Apple stock that had been quietly appreciating, over many years. And he came to us and said, "I had this unexpected windfall. I don't really know what to do with the cash. Can I donate it to charities?" And the truth is, we really didn't know how to answer him because the regulation around the question of stock donations actually wasn't very clear. It was, there was like a lacuna almost of if they would have to pay the capital gains or they would get the 35% tax benefit. Would it be both? Would it be or? The legal status wasn't very clear. Um, so just to put that on the
Maybe
side.
I'll just pause you on that so that we can explain to our audience what we mean by capital gains. And so, if, for example, this portfolio was 100 shekel invested, and now it's worth 200 shekel, there's a 100 shekel gain. And so in Israel, you typically pay 25% on that. That's 25 shekel would be owing. And so the question is, when you give stock, is the capital gains going to still be owing? And if you get a benefit from the capital gains, are we going to get a further benefit of 35% on the donation itself? That's the essence of the question, right?
Exactly. Like, is that 25%? So you're going to have to pay that. Will you also get the 35% as a regular, charitable gift? Like you said, it wasn't very clear what the exact status was. And if you compare that for a second to what's going on in the US, it's actually very clear because the regulations clearly incentivize philanthropic giving in the sense that you do also get, this exemption from the capital gains and whatever you would get from the charitable gifts. So kinds of it's a win-win there, right? You donate your stocks. By the way, it accounts for more than half of the giving in the US. And it's not a surprise because it really is the most strategic way to give. So people give, I don't know, like crypto and real estate and artwork and yachts and stocks, obviously, whatever it is, because they understand that they kind of have this double benefit. But like I said, in Israel, actually, the situation wasn't clear. Uh, so it's something that we really wanted to understand, and we kind of started this process with the tax authority to kind of clarify the situation. We were joined by our partners at KPMG to kind of make this happen. And I don't know, how many of your listeners have dealt with the Israeli tax authorities before, but I'll just say, in this situation, we were kind of trying to take money out of their pocket. So kind of mission impossible because it's the Israeli tax authority and we're trying to make this change. But after a long 2-year process, it actually came out that really the bottom line is going to be that there is this capital gains exemption plus the 35% tax benefit. For those of you counting, it's almost like a 60% benefit. And that makes it the most strategic way to give, mostly because from there you first of all have more potential to give to charities and give more. And also it's the best way to kind of look at it holistically, like you're doing with all the other areas of your, financial life. We can look at an example if you want, just numbers, like you said, but the idea is that now instead of paying that 25%, if you're donating it to a charity, to an Israeli Article 46, charity, you don't have to pay that. And I'll just add one more. This ruling came out about 2 or 3 months, not 2 or 3 months ago. At this point, around Pesach time, 3-4 months ago. And already there's been hundreds of stock donations because it kind of feels like there was this flood of people who have been waiting for the opportunity, and now that it's become above board, there are a lot of people who really wanted to take advantage and get started. So it's been really, really inspiring to see how much this is changing things for the philanthropic world in Israel now.
Yeah. Amazing. And so most of our clients have one of two different types of stock accounts. Either they've got one outside of Israel, like a US brokerage, Schwab or Fidelity or Interactive Brokers,
Mhm.
or they work with one of the Israeli brokerage houses or the Israeli banks, IBI, Excellence, or Meitav, or one of the Israeli banks. So maybe if we start from, if someone wants to donate stock that is currently overseas, So like, what would that look like? Is there a lot of bureaucratic overhead? How long might it take? And what kind of process do they have to go through to make that happen?
Yeah. So first of all, let's start with like the big picture for a second. So basically, if you look at the flow from start to finish in the macro, the idea is that you're transferring the shares or appreciated stock to an Israeli charity, in this case JGive, because we're able to help you, with all your further donations after that. But you transfer it to JGive. JGive kind of sells the stocks on the day that we receive them. The proceeds from the sale go straight to the donor advised fund or, the digital wallet that we're talking about. And from there, the donor can decide how they want to allocate it, if they want to park it and invest it or start granting it out right away. That's the big picture. That's the flow is that it's sold right away. We don't hold on to them and it goes into your account. There are a few different options in terms of the actual details of what it looks like, practically speaking, because the JGIF platform allows donors to decide if they want to donate American stocks for an American tax receipt, American stocks for an Israeli tax receipt, or, Israel stocks are being held here for an Israeli tax receipt. So first of all, the question is where strategically for you makes the most sense in your, internal calculations of what you want. But let's say that it's, for an American tax receipt for Americans, we work with Schwab brokerage accounts. It's super easy. It's very, the process takes not more than a couple of days and the funds ends up sitting in your accounts with us. Once the stocks have to transfer to Israel, it's a little more complex in the sense that we have to have the information in advance of which stocks you want to transfer. We let the bank know. We happen to work with Leumi Private Banking, but they come in. We go through a process with the donor. We really hold their hand throughout the entire process to make sure that everything goes smoothly. And then the same idea, they get to, the Israeli side of things. We sell the stock. Once it settles, we're able to put the proceeds from the sale into their account. But I would say the smoothest processes take a few days. The longer ones can take longer, a week or two, sometimes even 3. But in the end, it's a new process, and there are obviously going to be complications along the way. But we solve them, on a case by case basis with the tax authority as they've come in. So that's been, an interesting part of it. And I'm sure if we were talking in a year from now, I'd be able to say, sure, all the problems are solved and everything is really smooth. But for now, we're working on it on a one by one basis. And there's one other part that I'll, just explain. Basically, for those who are looking for an Israeli tax receipt, in the end, because this is so new and the banks haven't, the brokerage has, no one's received an official guidance from the tax authorities in terms of what to do with this. So we also guide the donors to receive what's called an Ishur Parthani, or like a specific permission per donor for that stock transaction, so that they can donate it without having the capital gains taken off, what we call nikui mas makor, without having it come out from the beginning. So, depending on the specifics of the case, we're able to guide the donors, one by one and help them understand exactly what process they need to complete.
Yeah. And so just, I guess, more detail on that with regards to what is Nikui Mas B'Makor. Typically, the Israeli brokerages, whenever you sell stock or when you transfer, they might withhold tax automatically. And so if we can email the tax authority and get an approval in advance, then we can guarantee that there won't be any withholding of that tax.
Right. And we work with a specific office. We have that connection with them. So we're able to really help the donors. If you provide them with X, Y, and Z, assuming everything is above board, you'll receive your tax, your Ishur, your permission, and from there, go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And when if we go back to the numbers that we spoke about before, if someone has 10,000 or 20,000 shekel worth of stock, are they able to donate that, or are there minimums to start dealing with stock?
So right now, because of the influx of so many, people who wanted to get involved from the beginning of the ruling, we've set a limit of about 50,000 shekels for stock donations. That having been said, we've kept a very specific list for donors who want to be doing it on a smaller level. And as soon as we get to it, we're going to reach out to those donors as well. And then anyone can benefit from the service. But right now it's for 50,000 shekels and above.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. What kind of plans do JGive have into the future? Are there any big projects that you're working on now?
But yeah, I mean, there's so much going on. Also, the war has been really significant in terms of the outreach that we've seen from, overseas and donors in the US and the UK and Canada and everyone just wanting to get involved and be part. So, just expanding activities there and understanding exactly what we can do for those donors, make the culture of giving from the US and the UK and Canada and other countries as well, by the way, which is something that's in the roadmap to kind of make sure that the charities that in the end that we've come to see, since the beginning of October 7th, they're really, it's like a must have as opposed to a nice to have thing up until now. And any way that we can really change that and give them more support is really great. So that's kind of the direction of what we're doing now. But, a lot more things with the tax authority and stay tuned pretty much.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it's very exciting to hear. And the ability for us to be able to do stock donations and to get centralized receipts. These are all amazing developments
Hmm.
in the system here in Israel. So I think, speaking on behalf of our audience, we appreciate the work that you're doing.
Wonderful.
Um, and thanks for joining us. So if someone wants to get in touch with yourself, or they want to set up a DAF, or they've got other questions about using the JGive platform, how should they do that?
Yeah. So first of all, they're always welcome to reach out to us. The JGive Platinum email is just platinum@jgive.com. My personal email at work is Rimon@jgive.com. Anyone's welcome to reach out with questions. Rimon is spelled RIMONE at jgive.com. And we're happy to have the conversation, answer any questions, and, spread the word about the donor advised fund and the stock donation.
Okay, amazing. Thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.